Across 2023, I used not one, not two, but 4 different bullet journals for my everyday planning. While 3 of these are what I call my everyday bullet journals and get filled with things like my monthly logs, future log, any weeklies or dailies, the other one is what I call a yearly collections journal, and funnily enough, it holds all of my yearly collections. Throughout the year, as I've completed the everyday journals, I've been filming flip-throughs of what went on and recording my thoughts, so today we're going to have a look at all of them together, starting with the yearly collections journal. Mainly because that was the one I set up first. As said, the yearly collections journal is for yearly collections, or in particular, those collections that I don't want to have to set up again when I inevitably move into another everyday bullet journal. Because as shown, I had 3 everyday bullet journals this year. Any collections that maybe they're a little bit too big to warrant setting up again, or I want to have a snapshot of the whole year in one place, those go in here. Because I don't typically need to set up 160 yearly collections, this is a journal that gets used year after year. So the first year I actually used it was 2022, and so we have the 2022 pages. We've already got a flip through of those ones though. So flipping on forward and we're into 2023. I decided to start off my 2023 pages with a cover page and a place for my word of the year. So you can see that my word of the year for this year was greater. The idea being it's bigger in size and also bigger in kind of intensity or like awesomeness. Along with the word I selected, I also put in a definition of the word, some runners up for other words that I was considering, and then a little bit of journaling to say why I picked that word. The idea was for this bottom space, I was going to use it to outline goals that were related to my word, and despite putting that on my list of things to do multiple times, I never actually got back to it, so we just have the one, which is complete more than 70 things on my 101 things list. I absolutely loved the theme of this setup though, this washi tape and then the gold paint and just so beautiful. I would certainly be tempted to do this theme again. In fact, this iteration of it is actually a repeat from a previous monthly setup, but flipping over and the next layout we have is my 101 things list. This is a collection where the name pretty much sums up what it is, so 101 things that I wanted to do in the year of 2023. This is something that I like to do every year, and usually they're just kind of smaller things or fun things, and we've got a little Dutch door here, so I only had to do the decoration at the top once. You can see that any of the ones that has a black box is something that I have actually completed, and I wrote down the date that it was completed, and any of the ones that are open haven't been finished yet. There are actually a couple more of these that I need to go and fill in, and at the time of filming this, we're only halfway through December, so there is still a chance that some of these get done, but I think that some of them will not be happening. Something that was a bit of a bummer for this page is that I left my journal open on my desk with my curtain open, so here you might be able to see that the numbers are in a kind of faint pink purple kind of color, whereas if we turn over, this is where it was open to, and all of those have been sun bleached after just one afternoon of sitting in the sun. This normally wouldn't be a problem because I don't normally leave my journal open at my desk, but I don't know, something to watch out for. After the 101 things list though, we have my 23 23s in 2023, or essentially 23 things that I want to do 23 times throughout the year. The layout of this one is split into 2 kind of sections, so we have the graph here, which tracks my completion of the 23 things 23 times, and then after this, we have all of these little Dutch doors where I could go and write down what those instances actually were. So for instance, the first one here is watch 23 movies, but what movies did I actually watch? It was really helpful to have this list of the actual specifics of each of those things, just so I knew when I'd actually recorded things. So if I put a dot down on the tracker, how do I know that it's for a specific movie? Or how do I know that I haven't accidentally recorded the same movie twice? Having these lists to write out the specifics was just a little bit more helpful. So we have the graph, lists 1 to 3, 4 to 6, so on and so forth. Some of these have not been completed to completion either, but it's one of those things that I consider this layout to be just for fun. It's just to get me doing more of this stuff throughout the year. I don't really put a lot of pressure on myself to actually complete it in full, much like my 101 things list. It's more so there as a record of things that were important to me and stuff that I wanted to do, but if they don't happen, it's not that big a deal. On this spread though, we have a summary of our book club reads across the year, so just a little box to write down the title, the author, and the reading prompt. And then this guy was my yearly challenge. My challenge for this year was a no spend challenge, or effectively having more no spend days than yes spend days. I haven't gone and filled in the data for the start of December, and as said, we're only halfway through December, so there's still a bit more more to fill in. But on this layout, we have the kind of year in pixels tracker to say whether I did or did not spend on that day, in accordance with these rules in particular. So on some of those no spend days, there was still spending, but it didn't go against these rules. Really, it was just trying to get a little bit more intentional with my spending, or rather not spending unintentionally. And at the bottom, to fill a little bit of space, I also put in how much I spent in each of the months of the year, but I haven't updated that fully. Flipping over, the next one we have here is what I was calling a habit or routine builder, but effectively we have things to do monthly and things to do weekly, and then I could just use my dot markers again to mark in when I did or didn't do those things. We had some varied success in these ones, and I found that in terms of the bathroom cleaning in particular, this didn't quite work for this one, mainly because when I clean my bathroom, I don't do it all at once, and that's kind of what I was recording here. I'll do it in like bits, pieces, phases, or whatever, rather than an all at once, all intentional, all bathrooms cleaned. We did also have some changes to our membership perks throughout the year, so a lot of black dots there, but that's okay, because the perks got changed. And then after this one, we have my future me problems. Now this is a collection that I like to redo with each new year, mainly so that I can go through each of the things I have on here and just check to make sure there's stuff that I still want to do. Again, because I was foreseeing there was going to be a lot, I put this one on a Dutch door, so I only had to do the header once. And I am looking forward to going through these come the end of the year and migrate the necessary ones to my next year's setup. Some of these also haven't been checked off, like replacing my iPhone cable, which I have now done. Over the page, and the next one we have is my then and again layout. So the idea with this one is that we have some prompts down the middle of the page, and I fill them in at the start of the year on January 1st and the end of the year on December 31st. So because it isn't quite December 31st for me, I haven't filled in the second iteration. But this is just a really nice snapshot of kind of what's going on in life at two different points. So start of the year and end of the year. I do like to set this layout up with each new year. So I do have a then and again for 2024, where on January 1st, I'm going to be filling in kind of similar prompts, but on a different layout. And it doesn't really bother me that it's going to be pretty much the same information. Like, not all that much happens in a day, unless it's a pretty special day. But going from year to year, I do have a tendency to slightly tweak the prompts, so I'd rather just have it on a separate layout. To finish off my yearly collections though, I had a word from me page, or effectively a page where I write myself a letter and I can open that letter at the end of the year. So this guy here was written on January 1st, and then come December 31st, I can read this one, and on January 1st next year, I can write myself another letter. Not to go on this page, but to go on a future one for my 2024 setup. With my yearly collection set up though, then it was time to move into my first everyday bullet journal. So while this one holds those yearly view things, or those things that kind of capture a longer span of time, my everyday journal is very much for the day-to-day stuff. So monthly planning, weekly planning, daily planning, also the occasional kind of themed checklist, stuff like that. For my first everyday journal in 2023, I went with a blue A5 notebook from Archer & Olive. I mean, all of these journals are from Archer & Olive, and if you want to save yourself some money, you can use code JashiiCorrin10 if you ever shop at their store. We love savings. On the inside cover of this one, I put my year at a glance because I wanted it to be something that, first of all, I only set up once, and then I could move into future journals for the year. Turns out that my next journal for the year is going to be a traveler's notebook, so it doesn't actually fit, but I am going to save this for my third journal of the year. I've been finding that last year and probably this year I have 3 journals per year, so this one will fit in my third journal, it won't fit in my second. But it is removable. These little pieces of washi tape just have it secured in the front, and then I can pull it out, put it into that future journal. Nameplate, you can see I went with that really nice kind of simple but not really like my typical style of cursive, and I've been enjoying that style quite a lot for my start of journal setups, so I used it here and I used it in my next journal in the Travelers. But flipping over, we have the first actual dot grid page of the notebook. We had my quote page for the notebook, but the grass is greener where you water it. Typically, I'd either have a quote page or the year at a glance on this page, and because I wanted the year at a glance to be a removable thing, that obviously didn't get put here, so nice quote page. Couldn't say I really turned back to it, but I still like having it here. After that though, we are into the future log, and as is typical for me, it had varied use. February was notably quite a busy month, there was a lot going on, so we have a lot written in there. Same idea with April, though some of these are just kind of like days of celebration, so like Anzac Day, Good Friday, Easter Sunday, Grilled Cheese Day, and Bubble Tea Day. The events for June through to December I need to transfer into my next journal, but there's not really too much that I've written down at this stage. I did like this style though. It's a similar style to what I used at my start of journal setup for 2022 as well, so one that I'm probably going to return to. After this though, we had my level 10 life and what I'm calling my level 10 actions. It's effectively, these are the different areas of life that I was focusing on, and these were the kind of simple things that I could do to try and build my kind of score in each of those areas. The idea was to use this space for journaling. That did not happen, and I think that's twice now that I've tried to leave journaling space for the level 10 life and not used it, so I'm probably not going to include that moving forward. On this one, the drawn line represents what my scores were when I scored it at this point, and the gold circles represent what I scored it last time. So that I could remember that, I put these little arrows on each of the little kind of change bars. So this one was the gold dot, it went up by 2 points to this score here. While I didn't necessarily turn back very often to the level 10 actions, I did get a good chunk of them done, so I can feel good about that. And this would be something that I'd probably return to. I like the idea of setting smaller, simpler goals for each of these areas, because these are the areas of my life that ideally I would like to have higher scores in, so then I kind of should have some things that I want to do to accomplish that. When it comes to organizing my start of journal pages, I like to keep like ideas together. So these ones were kind of life goal related. So on the next page, I was planning on putting my goal planning and action plan. Now, I set this spread up with the intention that I was only going to have 2 main goals for the year, and then it turned out that I didn't do that, so I actually did all of this goal planning and action planning in my brainstorming book. I did eventually move that stuff over into this notebook, but these 2 pages did not get used, sadly. Keeping on a goals theme, one of the goals that I did end up selecting was about my content making process, so we have some content calendars, just so I could plan in advance what was happening and also record any milestones. So this is January's content calendar, and then after that we have February, unsurprisingly. These ones I actually did quite like, and I wouldn't be opposed to going back to something like this at some stage, but I didn't find myself flipping back to it as often as I wanted to, and I also couldn't see my content stuff in relation to my other going-ons. That's why I started putting this content plan stuff into my actual monthly log, rather than just having it at the start of my journal. You can see by the time I got to April, I decided that it wasn't really quite working, so that's when I did that move, moving the content stuff into my monthly log. More goal-related things though. After this we have the 101 things list, or kind of selecting which of my 101 things I wanted to do in which month. My intention was actually to only have this journal last 4 months, which is why I have January through to April here, and not May, which did actually end up in this journal. I gave myself a reference page for my reset processes, and I wanted to start incorporating kind of daily resets. Again, this was a page that I didn't really refer back to, and I think that's because I actually put it on a page rather than putting it on a flip out. If this had been a flip out, I would have referred back to it so much more, because it would have been easier to just flip something out to the side of my journal rather than having to flip back to this specific page, which doesn't have any kind of identifying markers on it or anything, which is why in my next journal, The Travelers, I do have it as a flip out. Flipping over though, and we have my media list. This one was a combination of a media consumed and a kind of TBR or TBW or whatnot. So I could put down recommendations and things that I found that I'm like, oh yeah, I want to check that out, as well as the stuff that I actually consumed. So this column here with the tick, anything crossed off in there is something that I actually consumed, or slash means that I started it. Anything that doesn't have the cross means that it has not yet been started or not yet been consumed. Those things are going to get transferred into my long-term collections journal rather than into my next bullet journal, because I find that things on my TBR and TBW and everything else, they take me a little while to actually get around to consuming. On to the next spread, and this is the My Next Journal spread. This is a staple in my journal setups, so have certainly been continuing using those. I know that the thumbnail things aren't super necessary, but it's kind of nice to see that I have some variation in the decoration styles that I'm using, like doing the corners versus doing the top versus doing the side, and putting them in the right order and all of that kind of thing. Gives me a little map to follow when it comes to actually setting up my new journal, and having a note space to write down my thoughts about this journal while I'm working through it. Always helpful. Taking a step away from the buffalo plaid though, and getting into what was originally a more neutral spread, and that's because this one gets populated as I work through the journal and start planning out my themes for each month. So for each of those themes, we've got space to write in what the theme actually is, space to put down what the color palette's going to be, write out what spreads I want to include, any kind of decorative or aesthetic elements, that kind of stuff. Not strictly necessary, but I do like having it, especially for the spreads list, because if I have an idea, like in the middle of the month saying, oh yeah, I really want to set up like, I don't know, a reading tracker or something, I can write it down in that spreads list so I have it as a reference when I come to set up for the month coming. Notably, I only went to April because I didn't think I was going to have May in here, but oh well. On to January. In this journal, we continued using the projects list and the cover page combo. The projects list did go through a couple of minor tweaks. It's kind of space that I want to revisit because I'm not necessarily using it as well as I could, but we'll see. It stayed fairly the same in my first iteration in the Travelers, but I feel like it needs a little bit of a revamp to make it more useful to me. The general structure though is having my kind of projects for the month sectioned off into sections, funnily enough. So stuff for YouTube, stuff for, at the time it was just Patreon, but now it's our memberships. I also put in a section for the vlog channel, not that any content got made for that, and an other section for other things. The rubber ducks theme was really cute. I very much appreciated that I drew one good rubber duck on a piece of scrap paper, and then I just traced it in on every instance of a rubber duck here is me just tracing that original image. Nice big calendar, cute little rubber ducks. I enjoyed trialing the brush lettering. I'm slowly getting better. It's still not a strong point of mine, but I'm slowly getting better at brush lettering with an actual like brush pen. I felt very good about the actions list and my level of completion with it. I didn't feel so good about my habit tracking because I have a full page here for just 2 habits. It felt like a bit of a waste. Like I could probably have just tucked this into here, or I could have put it onto my self-care tracker, which I did very much enjoy. This one I know caused a little bit of confusion because the X's made people think that I didn't get anything done, but it's actually the black dot that represents not having done the thing. The book club tracker was another one that I didn't like so much because, you know, we've got 3 columns of dots and it just doesn't need this much space. Like, I could have combined the book club tracker and the notes and the habit tracker all together, and that maybe would have made more sense in my mind. Not ideal, but at least the ducks are cute. And I got to use more of the plaid, except I didn't have to draw that plaid, which was good too. The Instagram schedule and the posting elsewhere schedules were fine. I did end up taking them out of my monthly setups because I just combined all of this information onto my monthly log, but it's not necessarily a layout that I wouldn't use again. Then after this one, we had my monthly reflections. I got quite good at actually making sure that I filled in my monthly reflections at the end of last year. So I wanted to make sure that I kind of continued that for 2023. I have been going well with them. It's just a very nice overview of what happened in the month in terms of like my goals and my memories and whatever else. So I am going to be continuing those, though with minor layout tweaks given the different size journal. Now, I remember getting to the start of the year and thinking, oh my gosh, I need to think about what I want to do in terms of a weekly setup because I need like the perfect weekly. I need to have the weekly that is going to give me the most productive year ever. And I put so much pressure on myself that I literally had like, I don't know, analysis paralysis almost in a way, and I just couldn't even think of any ideas that came to weekly spreads. So I actually just went in with dailies. I'm like, the first week we'll just do daily logs, it'll be fine, and then we can figure out a weekly log style after that. Didn't happen. I ended up just using daily logs for pretty much the entire of this journal. But that's because they work. I quite like them. I've kind of come around on daily logs. So originally this was just going to be like a Sunday brain dump space, and then I had to say, as known as daily logging, it seems, because that's what I was actually doing. I enjoyed having the header in a different color because it just gave me something to actually like stand out to say, hey, this is the start of the new day. I should bring that back. And I also enjoyed having this little tick box in the top corner to say, yep, this one is done with. Everything is either completed or migrated to somewhere else or whatever else. So the dailies went very well. I also enjoyed having my meal log as part of that, and I had a little weekly reflection that I was doing every end of week in January. I feel like I kind of want to bring those back too, because I quite like them. But it's like this information technically could just get put into the monthly reflection, but I don't know, because it kind of feels like in my head that the monthly reflection should be for like big ticket items or like bigger stuff. So having just like a kind of smaller reflection space on the weeklies, not sad about that. So something to think about. Tick box again, enjoying that. So we've got more dailies, an office projects list, of which I got most things done. Getting my office set up was a big accomplishment for the first kind of little bit of the year. Weekly review, my meal log, more dailies, kind of slowing down with how much I was writing because we were getting towards the end of the month. That kind of happens pretty often for me. Small weekly review, couple more daily log notes, and then as we get towards the end of the month, you can see I just left these here. I didn't end up transferring everything over, thus no tick in the box. You might be able to see some little rust spots down here because when my notebook arrived, the bookmark was tucked into this page and there was actually rust on the little charm, which was a little bit unfortunate, but nothing so major, didn't bother me all too much. You may also see a couple of little brown spots through here, and that's because when we got into February, we did some tea staining in my notebook. The tea staining itself was a lot of fun, and I really love the kind of like aged look. The tea staining itself was actually a lot of fun, and I like how it gave me that kind of like aged look to my pages. But there were other parts of this setup that I didn't quite like as much, but we'll get onto that in a second. So our theme for February was science, so you might be able to see like our little kind of science doodly notes and stuff around the page here. I didn't want them to stand out too much because I also wanted to put them on the monthly log and not have it look too busy, kind of like blends into the background a little bit more compared to the calendar. So I went in with like a kind of sand colored Staedtler Tri Plus fine liner because it matched fairly well with the background. It kind of blended in a little bit better. You can see we have two kind of different styles of writing on the projects list, and that's because I decided after a little bit, like before I kind of really got set up for the month, but I decided that I wanted to write everything in italics. So you can see like these are all in italics, and then the stuff on my monthly log is all in italics. But I wrote this list in before I had made that choice. So these ones are all kind of very upright, and then those ones are all italicized. I also had some trouble with the headers because I wanted it to be kind of like fast writing, and I wanted to use my Tombow Fudenosuke for it so that it kind of didn't have like perfect black lines. But when I write fast like that, I don't necessarily get quite the letter forms that I want. So projects list I'm mainly happy with, except for maybe the R and the S. February I'm less happy with. This M and the W, they look pretty good. I like this T. I don't like this T quite as much. The S's are just awful. Like, just don't even look at them. Like, this one looks like a G and this one looks like a badly formed G. So, like, doing an S in that style was very tricky. So, didn't like that as much, but it's all good. I like the way that habit tracker turned out. I thought that looked pretty good. For this one though, I decided that my self-care tracker and my habit tracker were just going to get combined and become my habit tracker rather than having two separate pages. And the actions list stayed pretty much the same. I really enjoyed doing these kind of like coffee rings. Those were a lot of fun to add to the pages. I think they look very cool. Some more little chemistry notes down the bottom. And then flipping over, we're onto the Instagram schedule and the posting elsewhere schedule. Those ones both were fine. I really enjoyed the kind of burnt edges of the notebook too. And I'm glad that I ended up doing it outside because it did make my journal smell quite a lot of smoke. So if I had have done it inside, then my office would have smelt a lot of smoke, and that wouldn't have been ideal. The inability to draw S, a little bit sad. The word posting I like, the word elsewhere I don't. And then we have the monthly reflection. Again, love this page. Quite pleased with the layout in general. I'm just glad that I actually got in and used them. I did not write my spending statement or like my spend trend statement. I probably could go back and have a look at it, but I don't think it would be as helpful, I suppose, because we're so far removed from February now, but the rest of it felt pretty good. Now, some of the things that I noted here was that I didn't like in my journal that some of the tea-stained designs looked a little bit more phallic in nature than otherwise intended. For instance, this one. And the tea staining felt darker than it was kind of anticipated to be. I was kind of expecting it more to be like this color, but as it dried, obviously it got a lot darker. So some of the designs ended up quite dark in certain places, which meant that it was a little bit hard to actually see my writing. Like, I can read it, it's fine, but possibly would have liked it to be a little bit lighter. I also found that as I was getting through the month, because we did dailies again, and you can see that I changed the lettering style, and that also didn't sit so well with me. But as I was getting through the month, I was just getting kind of more and more over just having brown, because like that's literally my color palette, was brown and black. And it's not that I don't like brown, I suppose. This page here I actually quite like the look of. It's a little bit lighter though, so that kind of makes sense. But I missed color. I missed playing with brighter, punchier colors. So moving away from the February pages, this was my spread of just stuff that I needed to get done before I left. So things that I either needed to like film and get scheduled, or like organize in terms of posting for Instagram, or my a year of planning prompt posts and community posts and like whatever. Like, needed to just organize all this before I left for my trip to the US. And I did get a good majority of it done, so I felt good about that. These colors in particular were the ones that I was using in my travel journal, which is why I set it up in this color palette. But this was also reintroducing myself to the idea of using color in my journal, which I did like very much. So then when we got into March, I was like, yes, we need more colors, but the only color will be blue. I did really like the way this one turned out though. The headers in particular, I really liked, because this isn't something that I would usually do. I wouldn't necessarily know how to do it, but I was using quilting patterns that I found on a Google search as kind of inspiration for those. And that just made it a little bit easier. Again, the projects list is pretty much the same style though. We have the team member or like Patreon at the time stuff. We have my YouTube section. We had a space for extra videos, didn't quite happen. But the theme for March was quilts. So cover page, projects list. After this we have the monthly log. And I wanted to have a decorative panel down the side here, which is why I cut away for the Dutch door. But that also meant that I needed to make the calendar smaller. And I know every time I do it, even before I actually draw it out, I know I'm not gonna enjoy it as much. I like the way it looks. The aesthetic is great, but I can't write as much as I want to if I have calendar boxes that are this size. I like to have my 3 centimeters by 3 centimeters, and this is 2.5 by 2.5. And yes, that half centimeter in each direction does make a difference. But as said, I do like the way it looks. I do wish that I had, I don't know, done this better. You might be able to see it, possibly. The white that sticks out. There you go, that's better, you might be able to see it now. But the white that sticks out there, because I cut that little tab off so that the black section would line up with the other black tabs, but that meant that I had this white part, so when you flip it over, there's like this little white notch sticking out. A little bit frustrating. The actions list was fine in terms of its actual layout. I didn't use it quite as much because I was away for half the month, and then when I got back, I got really sick, which is also why my habit tracker didn't get used. This part I just decided I wasn't going to fill in, which is why I drew this line across here, but then I just got unwell, and I was unwell for like all the rest of the month and then another week. So it's not necessarily the layout's fault. I like this style of habit tracker, but I was not in the right space to use it, either because I was not in the country or I was not well. After this though, we had the posting schedule. Again, nothing wrong with the layout, it's just something that I decided to absorb into my monthly log eventually, like in the next month. And then after this we had a note space. Now the reason that I set up a note space is because I wasn't going to do any daily logging while I was away, because I know that when I go away on a trip, I don't use my journal as much. So this was the one that I set up with that knowledge in mind, making smart choices. But then I thought to myself, hey, maybe you actually will write some things down. Maybe you'll want to take some notes about your trip or like do some journaling. So we'll get to that in a second, but the reason this didn't get used as much as it could have was in part because of the stuff we're going to talk about. Review though, excellent, love it, actually got used, chef's kiss. After this though, I decided to set myself up some daily boxes. So I had pre-sectioned out spaces for dailies that I could just do some journaling while I was away, write about my trips and like, notes about sights and scenes and all of that, blah, blah, blah. But I know that I don't like to do that. I don't like to record my trips in a journaling format. So I shouldn't have bothered to set this up. A little unfortunate, but this spread didn't need this spread didn't need. I then changed it to a vertical style because I knew I was coming back, and then I'm like, okay, I'm gonna need to actually write down tasks, and I prefer to write tasks down in vertical lists. But then I got sick and didn't really use it all that much anyways, but it's fine. Again, I set this one up as a Dutch door style layout so that I could have those decorative panels and not have to do them on every single one of these spreads. Just do the decoration once and then have it visible on each of the different layouts. As part of my trip away, we got given this full sticker sheet, but none of the stickers were cut out individually, so I just took the full sheet and stuck it straight into my notebook. I of course jammed the sticker into this kind of like spine edge quite a bit though, so now my notebook naturally just kind of wants to sit at this page, which is a little bit unfortunate, but I really just liked the kind of like rainbow of it. I thought that was kind of pretty, and I wasn't going to cut them all out individually and use them, so I was like, yeah, we'll just stick that in as kind of like a big sticker memory. Flipping over though, and we are getting into April, and it's kind of funny because I said when I was talking about the February ones, I'm like, oh yeah, I was just really sick of the brown and I wanted to play with some more color. So then I did March, which was all blue, and then I got to April and I'm like, nah, no color, let's go to black and white. But we have a little aliens theme going on for April, so projects list, which at this stage is where I was kind of like, this isn't really robust enough. To tick off a project, how I use my planners video, for instance, that has so many steps, so to just have it as one kind of dot that I then have to tick off when it's completely finished, it's not super motivating and it's not super helpful to actually track the progress of the project, and that's kind of why I want to change it, but still got to think about that. I did enjoy getting to use washi tape in these setups though. Like my April pages, I did very much enjoy that. I also enjoyed using this style of lettering, just a little bit more like angular, which was kind of cool. We brought in another Dutch door, but because this Dutch door was cut on an interesting angle, I didn't want to have my monthly log right after it. So instead, I put in my actions list and my habits list. For my habits, I cut them way back, just tracking 4 things, and I also tracked what my leisure time activity was. So if I had actually had some leisure time in the day, I wrote down what it is I did. This was just a piece of blackout paper, whereas on the back of this one, I decided just to use some black washi tape because it was a little bit easier. And then after that, we're into the monthly log. So you can see this monthly log looks a lot more full compared to our previous ones because I'm actually also recording my content schedule. And I liked this way more. It actually means that I come back to my monthly log more often too, so that's been pleasing. I liked this side decoration. I thought that was pretty. But after that, we have my quarterly goal check-in. So I've decided to do my goals on a more quarterly basis this year rather than a half year or just a full year. So I use this as an opportunity to check in with my level 10 life and see how things might have changed, talk about my progress on my goals and which ones have finished, which ones am I still working on, recording milestones, and then having my goal ideas and which goals I was actually picking for the quarter ahead. Now I will say that quarter 2 in terms of goals, like we're only 2/3 of the way through it, but it has not been going as good as quarter 1. Just a bit unfortunate. Part of that is because I didn't necessarily have my goals mapped out in full before the quarter started, which is something I did have for quarter 1. But after this, we do have the goal planning pages. So planning my financial health goal, planning my merch product goal, which sadly has stalled at the moment, but we're getting there. Strengthening the community goal, and we've got the releasing the bullet journal basics series goal. So all of these goal plans, while I had done them or had done the equivalent of them in my brainstorming book at the start of the year for quarter 1. For quarter 2, we put them in this journal, which I liked a lot better because it meant that it was a little bit more handy. I could refer back to it a little bit easier. And my work routines goal. And then after this, we have the monthly review, because I spelt monthly wrong, and I completely didn't notice until somebody on Instagram pointed it out. A tad unfortunate, but it's alright, it happens. I didn't necessarily fill this one in quite as much as I could have. Like I had a bit more space in each of these that I probably could have filled some stuff in. I also didn't put in my spend trend statement, which is unfortunate happening. I thought I had done that, but I suppose I didn't. After this though, we are into those daily logs. These ones worked really well, bringing back the tick box. I liked the little washi tapes on here. I thought it was kind of fun actually playing with some washi tapes, but having to cut them out on this angle. For the ones with the grid, that was fine. For the ones without the grid, quite challenging to get it looking parallel. So I liked the layering, I liked using them, but I didn't necessarily like how anal I was being with putting them in. This one here is the bullet journal basics project plan. So writing out video ideas and project checklist steps and such. And then after this, we have this giant grid where I was going to be tracking my progress on each of these different video ideas. But then it turns out there's actually going to be more videos than just this in the whole series. So I don't think I'm probably going to come back to this page, but I am probably going to use this list again because this is actually quite useful. It's in the order that I want it to be, so that one I will refer back to. This stuff, not so much. After this, more dailies, more tick boxes, which are very helpful. More dailies, little meal plans throughout there. My new bullet journal planning, that's just this page because that one's dailies, but doing a little kind of mind map of what it is I want to include and like, you know, what that relates to in terms of life areas. This process was actually quite useful and I will totally do that again for my next new bullet journal. Dailies. I very much have been enjoying this kind of daily logging style though, with the 2 columns in the A5. I'm going to be a little sad moving into a Traveller's where I can't do that because there's just not enough horizontal space for it. But I'll still probably keep up with the daily logging because I do prefer that style. When it came to the end of the month though, I had predicted that I was going to need 2 more spreads to finish out my daily logging, but then for the last week of April my family was over, so I didn't actually end up needing quite as much space, but you know, still had it sectioned out for it. And then after that, we're on to May. Now you can see a slight change in the projects list here. This has been changed to memberships rather than Patreon, and we have 2 dots for each of them so that I can tick it off once it's done on YouTube and once it's done on Patreon. We also had the book club tracker, which I thought it's technically not supposed to be a project. It's supposed to be a bit of fun, but it just made more sense to put it on the projects list than have an entire page dedicated to tracking it. It fit easily there. It was nice. Cover page, very cute. I liked these little teacups. I thought they were a little bit of fun. Quite easy to draw as well. Again, putting all of my content stuff on the monthly log. Now, I will say, because this is the last month in the journal, and I find this happens with every journal I use, as I start getting towards the last couple of weeks in any journal, I super fall away on actually using it. So I have not been referring back to this as much as I should be, which is a bit of a bummer. I also included a section for a to-do list down the side here, but again, haven't been using the journal so much, so didn't jump back into it. Did not need to write down any to-dos here, which also kind of makes sense because I've just been writing them on my daily logs, but it's all good. We have the actions list. That one's fine, as per usual. I like this layout. I like this style. Works nicely for me. The return of the self-care tracker, because I was finding that all the habits I was tracking were pretty much self-care habits anyways, so I figured just like, you know, call a spade a spade. It's a self-care tracker. So we've got the daily stuff with its key, and then the weekly things and the monthly things. The style works. Not getting into my journal and thus not filling it out didn't work quite so much. The monthly reflection I'm not quite finished with because it's not quite the end of May, and I have at least penciled in my spend trend statement, so I at least have something there. Still need to go back through my calendar and fill in my memories, and then probably do a little bit more of a planner review and maybe write a note down or 2. All good. Now when it came to doing my daily logs for this, I was like, oh yep, I'm gonna write out the header like this, and then I realized it comes further than the halfway mark, so I'm like, okay, that's not gonna work. But I did it for these 3 days, and I think I might have done it for the next 3 as well. But it was just leading to a lot of wasted space because I was like, oh yeah, okay, May, for Thursday the 4th of May finishes here. I'm not gonna write the Friday here and then start the list up there. That seems silly. So same idea with Saturday. I'm not gonna write Sunday here and then write 1 task down or 2 tasks. That wasn't gonna work. So I ended up changing it to just be like, oh look, this page captures May 7th through 13th, and then I'll just use little headers to put in each of the days. But as we got towards this point in the month, I just kind of fell away with using it. Like what we have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, no Friday, Saturday, because I hadn't done anything on Friday, so I was like, oh, I need to write down all my ideas. Sunday, so that's okay, that's like a full week. And we get to this one, and it's like Monday, no Tuesday, Wednesday, little Thursday, little Friday, no Saturday or Sunday. Got to this point where I'm like, okay, not really using my journal. I don't actually even feel like going back and looking at this page, so we're just gonna write out a brain dump. And then the problem is that I've used the wrong color of pen for this, and I know that is like the smallest, most minor thing, but I'm so irritated. Can you relate to that? Like when you use the wrong color of pen for a header and you're just like way more irritated than you need to be. But I've written down my brain dump. I'm just going to continue to brain dump out my thoughts for the rest of the month. And then when we get to, what is it, Thursday is the 1st, then I will be moving into my new journal and doing dailies in there. So kind of a fresh start. So we've got this page free, this spread free, this spread free, and then we're into the back of my journal. This is just kind of where I was scribbling out some pins. So Monica brought over some Tombos she was destashing, so I was just testing hers versus mine, and then doing some kind of like little calligraphy bits saying, why is calligraphy S so hard? Testing out some color palettes for my new journal setup, that kind of thing. And then we're into the back. And in the back pocket, we've got a bunch of things, it seems. We got a card to me and my mom, which I need to show mom. Got my little Disney World ticket things that they give you so that you can get in. We've got the little golfing scores from when Vogel and I went and did mini golf because it was one of the few mini golf instances that I actually won, so I wanted to keep them as memorabilias. We have the A Year of Planning challenge, which I've only checked one off, which is a bit unfortunate. And then another little card, which was quite cute, saying, you are 1 in a million. After my A5 notebook, we were then into the Traveler's Notebook. This is my second bullet journal for the year. And while the A5 lasted me 5 months, this guy only lasted 3. Here on the inside cover, we had a sticker, which I got from Meg when I went to a planning day in Melbourne. And on the inside flip out, we had my weekly reset process and monthly reset process. Initially, the idea was to bring over the year at a glance calendar that I had in the A5, but it was too small to fit in the Travelers because the Travelers is a lot more narrow compared to the A5. But after the nameplate page, we then have a year at a glance on the first page here instead. So you can see we've got June through to January because the first month in this notebook was going to be June. For my starter journal setup, I was using washi tape from the washi tape shop, which is really pretty, but we have my future log in a similar style to what we had in the last notebook, with the future log starting in July because I didn't see much point in having it start in June when I was going to move into this notebook when it was already June. So July through to November and then etc. Flipping over though. Normally I would have goal pages, but because I was doing my goal setting quarterly and it wasn't the start of a new quarter come the start of June, I decided instead to move into my 101 things list, or the things I was hoping to achieve as related to that list, in each of the months that this notebook was going to hold. In terms of spacing, it was easier to do 4 months rather than just 3, so September's in here even though September isn't in this notebook. I wanted to have a go at doing a self-care bingo. Sadly, I never actually ended up filling in these 3 spaces, but I did at least set my quarter 3 goals, so I guess that's something. Along with not filling out all of the items on the bingo board itself, I also didn't fill out all of the rewards. I like the idea of this, but I really needed this bingo board to be completely filled in before I got started with the journal, which notably did not happen. Onto the next page. This one was the A Year of Planning challenge and all the tasks that I needed to do for that. I had the prompts written out to the end of the year, but I didn't actually finish posting all of those prompts. I did actually finish writing everything down for them in terms of the Instagram post kind of description or blurb, but you can only schedule things so far in advance, so I only got to this point. Friday fun, I had good intentions, but it didn't really happen, so alas. Moving on, we had my media log. I gave myself 2 pages. I probably didn't need 2 pages. I mean, notably this page didn't get used at all, but that might in part be because I wasn't necessarily recording all of the things that I wanted to consume, because around the time of this notebook, I also set up a reading journal, so any of my reading recommendations and stuff like that actually ended up in there instead. Over the page though, and we have my savings tracker and bills. This one I didn't quite finish filling in, and the bills I didn't need as much space as I gave myself, but that was something that I could kind of learn from having done this layout and then take forward into my next journal. Flipping over, we have my home tasks list and projects list. The projects list in particular I want to bring into my long-term collections journal, but I didn't dislike having this list in here, mainly so that then I could just jot it down in this notebook as I was using the notebook. The other section, I never really set out a specific intention for how I was going to use it, so notably it did not not get used. And the home task tracker I actually found quite tricky to remember to check back in with. I will also say that during the time of using this notebook, I was kind of in a journaling slump, so that certainly made checking in with my start of journal collections, which I always find to be a little bit tricky, even more tricky because of the whole journaling slump thing. Onto the next page, this was my new journal planning space. So you can see we've got the little thumbnails of the layouts I wanted to set up, and I drew them out as squares because I knew the next journal I was going to be using was going to be a square. The notes space, and then the pages to make. It ended up that I didn't actually have quite enough spaces in this pages to make list. I needed a little bit more. Similar idea with the thumbnails, but I just noted what I wanted to include down the bottom. After this one, we have my monthly planning pages, and I at least filled it in for the 3 months that this journal actually contained. Didn't end up filling it in for September, but I also set up a space like this in my new journal, which was going to hold September, which is probably why I didn't feel the need to fill it in here. But each of these just has the color palette I was using, the list of layouts I wanted to include, some general kind of decorative notes, and a font idea. 2 of these ended up the way that I wrote them out, one of them not so much. For June, our theme was donuts though, and I kept with the projects list. I kept with it for the entire of this journal, even though I was thinking about changing it. But we have the projects list for my memberships and the perks, and also other projects I was working on, and then my cover page. I really liked this theme. I thought it was bright and fun, and donuts were easy to draw, which is kind of nice because, again, whole journal slump thing. I will say that it reconfirmed to me why I feel that gel pens are my nemesis, because we had some transfer here, even after the gel pen was fully dry. Very frustrating. For my monthly log, I decided to try my hand at doing a vertical monthly log, even though I kind of know that I don't really like them. I was thinking that if I expanded it on this Dutch door, that it wouldn't be quite so frustrating. But the idea with the Dutch door was that each of the Dutch door kind of sides, I suppose, had a different use. So this was for events and appointments. This one was for YouTube content. This one was for community and community posting and things like that. And then this was for other types of posts. I can't say I necessarily stuck very well to those descriptors, but I like the idea of the Dutch door and the mini calendar. It's just that in terms of a monthly log, I would much rather have a calendar view rather than a vertical view. Over the page though, for this one, I had my actions list and I did it over the full spread. So we have the one-off actions and the weekly actions. At this point, I was still working in my quarter two goals. And you can see that completion was not great, both in terms of actually checking things off and just getting stuff done. I was kind of headed into the mid-year slump. It was kind of a double whammy, I guess. We had the journaling slump and the mid-year slump. So, not so great for our actions list. I like the layout, but completion could have been better. On to the next page though, we had my self-care tracker, which you can see also wasn't getting a lot of stuff done, given the whole slump-esque type thing. I thought that maybe part of the reason could have been that I was trying to track too many things, so in the subsequent months I kind of stripped back a little bit. But on this one, a tick meant the thing was done, and a black dot meant that it wasn't. I didn't end up filling it out at the end of the month, which is kind of typical for me in terms of my trackers. We had our weekly habits, which I filled in all except for week 5, even if I didn't get it done. And monthly habits, which I didn't check off either of. So I assume both of those didn't actually happen. For this spread, we had a meal log where I had a space to plan my meal and a space to log my meal. So this side I would write in ahead of time what I was planning on having for dinner, and then I could check off did I or did I not have it as planned. So a tick to say yes, it was planned and I had it as planned, and a cross to say no, I had something else. And then these columns here I could use to say, does it have vegetables, does it have a meat or a protein, and was it fast food or takeout? Or more so, a tick to say it was not fast food or takeout. Around this time I was also taking a trip to Melbourne, so I put a packing list in here too, so I could plan that ahead of time. And then after this we have my reflection page, which I'm sad that I didn't fill out more of, though I understand why it happened. aforementioned slumping. I did at least fill out some of the memory section, some of the wins, and a little bit of the challenges and the planner review, but not so much the other sections. I mean, to be fair, the wins and the memories are the two in particular that I care about the most, so that's probably why I took the time to actually fill those ones in. After this, we are into my daily logging though, and I was continuing with the idea of just putting a header for the day, writing out everything I wanted to, you know, whether that be for this day or for later, and then just capping it off with the next header, so on and so forth. This style of daily logging I did really enjoy, and I brought back the little tick box to say that this page had been dealt with once I had gone through and migrated any open entries. So we have the 1st through to the 4th, and then we had a weekly reset brain dump section, and after this we start the next week, so Monday through to Thursday, and then Friday through to Tuesday. If I did a weekly brain dump, I obviously didn't do it in my planner this week, but that's all good. I like the bright colors. I thought that they were really fun for the headers, and I find it very satisfying looking at a full list of tasks, even if they didn't all get done. Having it all written out is very satisfying. Sunday, the 18th of June, I believe, was before I left for my trip. I think these were the last 2 days before my trip, so I had heaps to get done. And then after that, we go into a slightly different layout because I was having a go at doing a weekly reflection, or I guess a weekly log, in the style that writer Carol talks about in the bullet journal method. It is a little bit tweaked though, because technically speaking, he just does reflection on this side and then a kind of task list for the week ahead on this side. I turned mine into an Alistair method. I don't really know why though, because I was going to be away for the week, so it didn't really make a lot of sense to do that. But it was nice writing out my reflection for the week and having some pointers about things that were going on and all of that kind of thing. And even though the Alistair method didn't get used like super lots up on this week, I did at least use some of it down the bottom. After this, we have the end of the month, still done in the Alistair method. And then we are on to quarter 3, or quarter 3 planning, I suppose. So at this point, we were doing kind of the mid-year check-in type stuff. We've gotten to the end of June, we're moving into July, and I wanted to plan how I was looking to accomplish my goals for the rest of the year. Part of this is very much about looking back though, so we started by looking at memories, the goals that I was working on, any wins and challenges, and also any responses that I had tried to my challenges. We have a lessons learned space down the bottom, and then we have a level 10 life check-in. All of the little colored dots represent kind of threads or common themes, I guess, in all of the stuff that I was doing here. So if we flip over, anything green, for instance, was finance related. Anything that was yellow was related to procrastination, that kind of stuff. Because I could use all of those colors and how often they showed up in this goal setting space to figure out what goals I might actually want to work on for the quarter ahead. So that's what I set up here. These were the goals that I was setting myself for quarter 3. After setting the goals though, we actually have to plan them. So the pages that follow this are my goal plans. Thinking about like, why do I want to work on this goal? What's my ideal outcome? What metrics of success do I have? And then the action steps to actually work on those goals. So 2 goals here, got another 4 goals here, another 2 goals here. And then after this, we are into July. I was very much thinking that I wanted to change up my projects list. I mean, I was thinking that back in May, but I didn't actually end up changing it at all until I moved out of this notebook. So again, we have the projects list with my perks for my memberships, and then other stuff that I was working on, and my cover page. As you can see, for July, we were going with a chess theme, and rather than drawing these out myself, I did just print them off, cut them out, and stick them in, which was a lot easier. I knew I wanted them to look exactly like the reference pictures, so why not just use the reference pictures? Now, as said, my monthly log in June was not really ideal, so for July I decided to change it up and go with a kind of rotated calendar view. So rather than every row being a week, I have it that every row is a day of the week. So the top row is Monday, we've got Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, so on, which means that in terms of actually reading this monthly log, you start here on the left-hand column, work your way down, and then move to the next column, work your way down, to the next column, work your way down. It took a little bit of getting used to. I mean, I only used it for this month and the next, considering there are only 3 months in here. But I found this view to be much more satisfying compared to a vertical view. I just like calendar boxes. I like being able to write multiple things on any given day of the month, and I like those multiple things to be on separate rows. So for instance, like Bujo Wednesday, and then next row, theme voting, and then next row, doctor's appointment. Added some decoration to fill in the extra space, but yeah, this layout I enjoyed much more. Given the fact that it was a new quarter, I was very excited to take more action on my goals and get more done, so I set myself up a full spread for my actions list and titled the sections one-off or monthly tasks for this entire page and weekly tasks for this entire page. But as you can see, I set this up prior to planning my goals, so I didn't actually need this for July. I didn't have any weekly tasks that I needed to do for my goals in quarter 3. So instead, I just continued writing out my one-off and monthly tasks because I really wanted to expand things. And you can see that I got a lot more done compared to June, which was honestly so satisfying. I didn't get everything done, but I got a good chunk of stuff done, and that felt good. So, monthly actions list. Then after this, we have my self-care tracker. You can see, as said, I stripped it way back. Rather than tracking a full kind of page of daily tasks, I just picked 2 in particular that I wanted to focus on. And although the completion of those things was not super great, at least it wasn't as bad as the month before it. I still had the same weekly habits. These were all set up to kind of mimic my weekly reset process. So you can see like tidy desk, brain dump, initial brain dump, so on and so forth. There were a couple at the end that are not so much related to that weekly reset, but I thought it would be good to keep track of which parts of the weekly reset I was actually doing more consistently. The meal log / planner stayed the same, so planned, actually eaten or logged, and then those kind of little bits and pieces that I was tracking for each of those dinners. And then after this, we have the monthly review, which I actually filled in, except for my spend trend statement, which is a bit of a bummer, but look at how much better this is compared to June. So that's very satisfying to see. We had a bunch of good memories, a bunch of wins, some other stuff, just feels good. After this one, I decided to set up a tracker for a goal in particular that I was working on, which was the Bullet Journal Basics series. So you can see I listed out all of the stages of making the videos down the side here, and then all of the video titles, or like a kind of abridged version, along the top. I put this on a Dutch door so that I could get all of those on there, and also cutting down by the side meant that I could write this list out once and not have to write it out again. Anything that has a larger black dot is a video that I decided I wasn't going to end up making. Any tick meant that thing happened, and any small black dot meant that it wasn't necessary for that video. This section here I left open just in case there were any more videos that I thought of, or if there were any notes that I wanted to take. Obviously didn't end up wanting to do any of that, so I just left it blank. For my daily logs, rather than doing the kind of header, list, next list kind of method that I had been doing for the previous months, I recognized that I was going to have enough space in this journal to do effectively a day per page. So that's what I decided to do. I also wanted to do this so that I could start using the tactics that I read about in the book Make Time. So at the top of the page, we had the little tick is a thing that I would actually check off, but that was my highlight for the day, or focus. We had a little eye for my focus and rating it out of 10. A little lightning bolt for my energy and rating that out of 10. We had hashtag for the numbers of the tactics I was trying, and I was going to try 3 per day. And then the question mark is like a how did it go reflection type thing. So for instance, number 1, write it down. Number 1, this works to hold me accountable. So listing out what the tactic was and how I found it. The little heart just means gratitude. So each of my daily logs in July had that same format. So the kind of pre-scaffolded stuff and then just the task list for the day. So same idea for Sunday, Monday. I'm not really going to spend a lot of time on all of these because you can kind of see that they are the same style. I decorated each of my dailies with the washi tape though, and every so often also put in one of the chess pieces. It made for nice easy decoration and kind of kept me in my daily logs. I think that I did a pretty good job of actually using them until we get towards kind of the end of the month, which as we've said is kind of typical for me. I don't necessarily utilize my journal super well after I've started setting up for the next month, which can be a little bit of a problem when you set yours up ahead of time so that then you can film it and get a video out for it, but anywho. You can also see that some of these days I didn't end up filling in my tactics, given things like mid-month slumps or just getting busy or whatever. See, it says here, neglected today. Oh well. But it meant that I came back a couple days later and did a very good job with my actual writing things down and daily logging and such. Towards the middle of the month, I also didn't do so great in the decoration space, but it doesn't really bother me. I just like the fact that some of these pages are actually quite full. That is more satisfying to me compared to having decoration on each of the pages. Given that I wasn't necessarily checking in with this top stuff though, it meant that when it came to the month after, August, I knew I didn't want to keep it the same. I didn't want to necessarily do my daily logs and have to write out which tactics I was using and my reflections for each of those. I liked the idea of doing a daily log per page, but I didn't like having to write out all of the pre-scaffolded stuff. So I did end up changing that up moving into the next month. Because July was 31 days, I had an extra page, so I just filled that with a brain dump. And then after that, we're into August. The theme for August was sunflowers, and to do that I used this sunflower washi tape, which is just like so super pretty. We again have the projects list here and the other projects, so perk related, non-perk related. The cover page, which we kept nice and simple. Again, I was still very much in my journaling slump at this stage, so it was kind of nice to utilize the washi tape because it just made for really easy decoration. I again went with that rotated calendar view, and we can actually check off that some of these things happened, because why not? Spoilers, technically it's the 21st when I'm filming this, which is why I am not ticking off more. Although this style did work very well for the travelers, I was very much looking forward to getting into my next notebook, which as said was going to be a square, so that I could go back to a more traditional calendar view. But anywho, after this one we have the actions list, and rather than making it a full spread, I just decided to put it on one page and combine that with the self-care tracker, which honestly didn't do a great job of checking in with. Slump, rah rah rah. This guy here was a make time tactic tracker though, which sadly I also didn't do a great job checking in with, because it would have been really cool to see this all filled out, but the idea was that I had the numbers for the tactics that kind of resonated with me at the top of the page, and then I could tick off for which days I actually tried them or did them. We could also use a little dot to say that it was planned but didn't happen, and then anything that was open was one that I hadn't planned and didn't do. A little unfortunate that it didn't happen, but I like the idea of it in general. After this one though, we are into my reflection. As said at the time of filming this, it is actually the 21st of August, so I haven't filled it in, but I am hoping to have it filled in before we start September. This one has all of the same sections as usual though: wins, challenges, improvements, memories, yada yada yada. Flipping over. Now I had a bit of a mishap when it came to doing my dailies in August, because I counted out to see if I had enough space in the rest of my journal to fit a day per page, but when I was counting, I counted like this: 2, 4, 6. But when I came to actually sketch things in, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, you counted 2 per page rather than 2 per spread. So I thought that I had to do 2 per page when I was setting it up. So I went and ruled a gold line down the middle of each of these pages, and I got fairly far in until I realized, wait, there's like so many pages left in this notebook. Why did I'm sure something must have gone wrong. Went back and recounted, and yeah, it wasn't great. You can see again around the mid-month kind of area, I got a little bit of a slump going on here, didn't fill things out quite as much. This was also around the time that my parents were over, so here I was kind of catching up on work. I have a tendency to just not use my planner when I get busy, which is like a super great habit to be in. But flip it on over. See these ones, varied amounts of use, varied amounts of decoration. But again, it's nice that the decoration was easy because it was just using those washi tapes. Then we flip over to our current day, which means that the remaining pages, although they have been set up, they don't have anything in them just yet. And then we get to the back of the journal, and you can see here that I have this piece of tape that runs down the middle because the back cover started falling off. You might have been able to notice as we've been going through, like it kind of sticks out quite a lot. And that's because it's literally ripped the whole way up here. Because Jess is a menace and she doesn't treat her things right. I don't know. I don't think I treated it that bad, but obviously it was bad enough that the back cover decided to fall off. Oh well. Flipping over though, we have the back pocket with the sticky note that I had transferred from my A5 journal. And in this back pocket, we have the grid spacing ruler that I also transferred from my last journal, because the vertical spacing of the travelers is the same size as the A5. Technically can't use the back side because that's a little too wide for a traveler's, but at least the vertical side is all good. The Travelers was a fun 3 months, but the last 4 months of the year were in my square notebook. This one not only has much wider pages, but also has more pages. 160 versus 144. For that reason, I was able to fit 4 months in this one, rather than the 3 that we had in the Traveler's notebook. But starting on the inside cover, you can see that the little post-it note has made its way over, and I did get that iPhone cable. Need to tick that off here too. No flip outs or anything kind of special on this one, just a little sticker. And then we are into the first page, which rather than putting in a year at a glance on that first page or some kind of like quote page or anything like that, I turned the very first page into a pocket. So you can see we have a couple things stored in here. We have that year at a glance that was in the A5 notebook from the start of the year, because this one actually fits in this journal. We also have a little kind of almost rainbow order for the dot markers. I was using this while I was doing a stream where I was trying to color match the dot markers to the Ohuhu pens. And we also have a little ruler bookmark, but it's only one-sided this time because in the square notebook, the horizontal and vertical sizing is the same. All of those can just get tucked back into the little pocket though. And that one's just made by turning it into a Dutch door, like cutting away the top and then sticking the outer and lower edge to the page. In this journal, I elected to put a key on the front page, not so much because I don't know my symbols, but more so I, 1, wanted to be a little bit more consistent with them, and 2, I wanted to start color coding, mainly in terms of my monthly log or my future log, not really in terms of tasks, but I wanted to have a place to hold that color key, so figured I might as well put the symbols in as well. For the starter journal setup in this notebook, I did washi tape for the decoration again. These ones are also from the washi tape shop. They are absolutely beautiful, but sadly they don't actually sell this set in particular anymore. But flipping on over, and then we have the future log. For the future log in this one, rather than doing those kind of like, I don't know, boxes or like sectioned out spaces for each of the months, which I used in the past 2 journals, in this one I decided to go with a calendex. We have a separate video on the channel about the calendex if you want a little bit more information about how it works. But the very general gist is that we have each column being a month of the year, each row being a day of the month, and then you can use these little dots to indicate things that are happening. In the traditional calendex, these dots get filled with a page number. So for instance, any of the dots here that say 3 are referencing an event that is on page 3. Now you will see that as we go through, I totally stopped numbering my pages, but that's fine. I at least brought over those things that I already knew were happening and put them on this little events list here. And I also used some little icons to represent other bits and pieces. For instance, a little kind of dollar sign for a payday, a little open book for Bujo Wednesday, a little closed book for a book club meeting. But one of the things that I found with this is that like, my journal's only gonna last 4 months. I didn't have September in here because I started the journal in September, so didn't see much point in putting it in. But that means that realistically, only 3 of these months are actually housed in the notebook, and the rest of these are outside of that span of time. So anything that I'm scheduling in here that isn't kind of like a formal event probably might not happen on those days, but anyway, flipping over, we have my before 2024 spaces. So this was kind of like a 24 before 2024, of which I have again done a couple more of these and I can color them in, but not right now. And this side in particular was for my 101 things list. So pulling over those items that I want to do in specific months, and also a space to put down any ideas that I have for my 101 list for next year. It is good to see that a good chunk of these things got done though, so that's kind of nice. Going with the idea of grouping the pages in my start of journal setups, all of these next ones are kind of related to work or kind of work scheduling, that kind of stuff. This one was going to be an ideal weekly schedule or kind of like a rough look at what my week would look like, but I've since decided to move to a fortnightly schedule rather than a weekly one, so I never actually came back and filled this in outside of the events that pretty much happen every week. That being said, we don't necessarily have a Discord event every single week. We have them most weekends, but not every single weekend. And the mastermind meeting only happens every 2 weeks. And it's also been moved to Thursday. A similar idea with the work versus home list. When I wrote stuff into this, I had moved things to different days, but then promptly moved them back, and yeah, it was just kind of messy. I also didn't use my projects list, but you know, that's fine. The lack of use of the projects list is probably in part because I then had this projects spread So this one here was for the Bujo Basics series and planning out everything that still needed to be done for that. The majority of these things have actually been finished, they just didn't get ticked off. And we also have a place for the A Year of Planning challenge, and again, these need to be ticked off too. The idea for this part was that it was for Vlogmas, but didn't come back and fill this in. In fact, I ended up setting up an entirely new collection for Vlogmas in the back of the journal, but we'll get to that in about 100 pages. It was nice to try some different layouts out though and kind of see what did and didn't work for me. I brought back monthly content planning, which I tried previously, so effectively a monthly calendar for each of the months that this journal was going to house, and then mapping in when I was going to be releasing different pieces of content. So whether that be for the YouTube channel, whether that be for my memberships or membership perks that I was putting out, any kind of community events, and I also set up a little color key for this one, specifically writing it here so that I didn't get myself confused between the colors used on this one versus the colors in the notebook as a whole. I did pretty good at using it in September and October, at least in terms of mapping things out, but November and December, not so much. This was again one of those instances where it's like, oh, I'm busy, let's neglect my planner, which, yep, as said, is a super good way forward, not really. Another one that I had high hopes for but didn't really get as much use as I would have liked is my finances layout. I really like the layout of this, it's just that I don't really like to track my finances like this. Of course, I have put another finances layout in my new journal setup for 2024, so we'll see how that goes. But a layout that I haven't included in my 2024 setup is my media list, which is kind of strange because obviously this one gets way more use compared to my finances list, but that's okay. The idea for this one though is that we have a column to indicate which month each of these pieces of media were consumed, and then I could put in a little icon to indicate what type of media it was. So like a little book icon or a little kind of TV or a little game controller, that kind of thing. I don't think that including 2 columns here was too optimistic because I know there are some other things that should be on this list, which would probably knock us over into that second column, but it's just kind of nice to see which months in particular were my content heavy months in terms of that media consumption versus the ones where life got very busy and that kind of fell to the wayside. Thus the lack of things in December. This layout is one that I really enjoyed and have actually been coming back to and using a lot more. I have actually fallen off with filling this one in sadly. Again, busy life, empty journal. But moving from left to right, on this side we had a space to outline any of my favorite meals, in particular ones for lunch and dinner, for breakfast, or for snacks. Not only is this kind of a nice little snapshot of what life was like at the time, so if I come back to this journal in, future years and say, oh look, Jess really enjoyed tortellini or like whatever. But it was also kind of a little inspiration station, so when I'm feeling snacky, what do I actually like to snack on? Come back and have a look at those things. These two in the middle though were my health related challenges, so we had a physical health challenge and a mental health challenge, being movement versus sleep. And for each of those, I set a low bar and a high bar depending on how much of that thing I completed, or the specifics of the completion. When it came to movement, this was time-based, so 2 minutes of exercise versus 10, and then for sleepy time, it was about being in bed by 11 versus being in bed ready to sleep by 11. This little guy at the top here is my self-care bingo board. And again, there's still a little bit of time left in the year, so maybe I'll do some of these. I just used this magnetic bookmark so that I could actually turn back to this page because it had a tracker that I wanted to keep updated. I was initially thinking about setting some kind of rewards for completing the bingo board, but I never really ended up doing that, and then filled this area in with the high bar, low bar for the challenges anyway. Flipping over, and then we are into my new journal planning. Let's move this guy so you can see Nujo for new journal. This section was done again with that kind of Alastair method, so K for keep, S for scrap, C for change, and T for try. And then I could write down some little notes about what I wanted in my 2024 planner system or planner lineup, or layouts that I wanted, really any kind of notes. And then in particular, I wanted to plan out my everyday journal and my yearly collections journal for the new year. For the yearly collections, I did go in and actually put in some little kind of thumbnails of what they were going to look like, but for the everyday journal, I did not get around to that. Much like our last journals, I did want to put in some kind of planning pages for my different themes, but I expanded this one to not only the months that were housed in the journal, but also the start of journal setup, and then my yearly collections journal start of journal setup for next year. I have a space for my everyday journal setup, but I did not put it in, and I haven't quite yet planned January, but I might fill that one in. Again, each of these just has the little color swatch or like a place to put in some washi tape or whatnot, a place to write down any aesthetic notes, spreads that I want to include, and the font that I want to use. Oftentimes though, the most important one really is the spreads to include. That's one that I probably need to keep in my new journal, but maybe not necessarily the other stuff. For September, I was just feeling like I needed to get back into creativity. In August, honestly, I was feeling a bit down. I was in a bit of a creative slump. While the washi tape had made it very easy to set up my pages for August, I really wasn't enjoying the traveler's size, and I was kind of just missing being a little bit doodly and just being a little bit more fun in my notebook. For that reason, I decided to draw things in for this theme rather than just relying on washi tape or stickers or whatever else. Though this caution tape is a washi tape, but the general theme here was crime scene investigation. So this is kind of like our crime board with the red string. And while typically the cover page would be on the right, and that usually is my personal preference, I decided to put it on the left this time so that I could really embrace the extended width of the square notebook and put in some little tabs. I love how these tabs turned out. I really liked the thick black outline. I kind of think it makes it like pop off the page. But so that the crime scene board didn't really get in the way of those tabs, I just decided to put it over here. For the projects list though, we have the perks related to the team memberships. We have the Bujo Basics series that I was doing, and then some other stuff that I was getting in and doing as well. Not all related to content creating, but mostly related to content creating. And then over the page we have the monthly log. Now for a good few months in this journal, I was trying to put the monthly log on just one page because technically speaking in the square you can fit it in, and you do technically have enough space to write stuff, or at least I technically had enough space to write stuff, but it was feeling kind of cramped, so I did end up moving away from this in later months, but it took me a while to actually do that. In August, one of the things I really felt was missing was having a monthly tasks list, or a place to just write things down on a monthly basis, so I put one in for September and then did not use it at all, but it was a nice little space for some more decoration, so I'm not too sad about it. This spread has the actions list, which I just have 2 columns for, and then my habit tracker and that weekly tracker as well. I wanted to add a little bit of decoration to this one by putting in some kind of like bloody fingerprints, and full on like stained my finger when I did that. It came off eventually, but my finger was looking very red and aggressive. As is typical, I did not fill in the habit tracker for the end of the month, and I think this is just a lesson that I have to learn over and over again. For the new year, I am doing some new things when it comes to my habits, but you know, at this point in time, still trying to stick with it. Still trying to kind of like recapture the magic that we had in January where my tracker was super full, but it's all good. Around this time is also when I started planning out my course. So I'm going to be having a goal setting course and goal planning course coming out in 2024. And this spread was intended for the course planning and kind of like putting out the steps that I need to take in order to get it made. But then I ended up doing the majority of that stuff digitally, so I never actually ended up writing anything here. I left it here and left it open just in case I wanted to come back and write things down, but I never jumped back into it. Flipping over though, and this is probably my favorite spread from this month, mainly just because it looks so full and I'm like allergic to white space or something. But I love having all of the different sections for my monthly reflection, and then we also had the quarterly reflection. So same layout as usual, just with kind of 9 boxes instead of more. Wins, challenges, improvements, memories, things I did and didn't like about my journal for the month, looking forward to and nervous about in the same box, goals, and then my finances. For my quarter 3 review, so this was done at the end of September, but I decided to put it next to my other reflection because I had space for it. And this one has kind of similar sections, so goals worked on, wins, challenges, memories, but then I also put in specific sections for things that helped, things that hindered, and things that I learned. This is kind of similar to the improvements, but a little bit more expanded on. But as said, I just love how this spread turned out. This last tab here isn't actually a tab, it's just drawn onto the page, because after this we are into the kind of weekly and daily setups. Now, because this was my first experience with the square, there was a little bit of testing the waters in terms of how much space I needed for my columns. So on this first one, we have kind of half page setup for each of these. So a half page for this column, a half page for this column, so on and so forth. This one over here is just a space to outline what was happening on each of the days of the week. I then had a little meal plan, a little priorities list, and this was supposed to be a weekly task list, but I didn't really use it. And then after that, we are into the daily logs. As I mentioned before, the traveler's notebook in terms of its size really wasn't working for me so well. I was feeling kind of uninspired by my planner. So I ended up moving into this one early in terms of putting things in. If we have a look, this one has Monday the 28th, 29th, 30th and 31st of August. So typically I would include those pages in the previous month because that month has more of the days of the week, but I was just needing a change. I wasn't really using my journal and it was irking me, so I moved on into the square early, even if only by like 4 days. My Monday task list took up the full column. Tuesday took this space here with a little bit of extra space. I did have the decoration in here before I started, so it would have gone over the page otherwise. But because that one finished here, I didn't see the point of starting Wednesday when there's only like 2 lines. So I put Wednesday over on this one, and you can see I changed to doing it in thirds. The thirds is something that I've kept up with for pretty much the rest of this journal because I love the amount of stuff you can fit into the layout, and you still have a decent amount of writing space. Yes, some of the things go across multiple lines, but I've been feeling really good about how much I can fit into this notebook. You'll have seen that we have some little yellow dots here, and that was kind of to set my priority task for the day. And then once the priority task is done, I set another one, so I kind of bunny hop in terms of priorities. So for instance, this day had 3 priorities that I was working on, but I only selected one, then completed it, and then set the next one. That's something I want to get more consistent with because it has been really helpful. On this page, we're starting a new week, or at least in terms of putting in the weekly events list, but when it came to putting in the events list versus the task lists, I wasn't really too sure on how to tackle the spacing. So you can see this one is kind of roughly split into halves, whereas this one is into thirds. I did figure it out eventually, but I wanted to try and keep it a little bit more consistent, so in subsequent ones I elected to go with a different style. Rather than just having one long column for all of the days of the week, in this one I split it into 2 columns, so I could have a little box for each of them, and I feel like that just made the page look a little bit nicer. So this one is still in thirds, as is this one, whereas on the previous ones we had halves and then thirds. With these little doodles, I was intending on going back in and like actually drawing in a little picture and then coloring stuff in. I just didn't get around to it. But I found that this month was just so much fun, and that was very much something that I was kind of missing from my journaling. Having that ability to be a little bit creative, get a little bit doodly. I will say that didn't necessarily last throughout the rest of this journal, and I'm not really sad about that either though. I'm kind of taking a 1 month on, 1 month off approach to doing doodles in my journal, and on the off months opting for stickers and washi tape and stuff like that instead. I keep saying stickers, I don't really use stickers, but anywho. Come the end of the month though, I left myself this spread to finish off my daily logging, and it turns out that I had effectively enough space for a column per day. So we have the 27th of September through to the 30th, a place for an end of month brain dump, and then the 1st of January because it was a Sunday. So I put that one in here rather than in the October pages. And then after this we have my Q4 goal setting. In this one I had 2 main goals that I was working on for Q4. So we had building work routines and working on my goal setting course. I will say that because Q4 has been so busy, I haven't been very good at coming back and actually checking in with this. But the actual setup of the page I really like. A lot of this stuff also has been done, I just need to check it off. One of the things that was kind of tricky about my goal setting in 2023 is that my everyday journals didn't really align to the cutoff points for each quarter. So for next year, I'm moving all of this kind of stuff into a separate journal where it's specifically dedicated to goal setting and goal reflection and stuff. But now we are into October, and the theme for October was space. Now, I will say that in terms of a space theme, I don't think I really hit the nail on the head here. Like, I really enjoy the color palette, and I thought it was kind of fun to use pastels, which is something I don't typically tend towards, and these tapes are all absolutely gorgeous, but when I think space, I think different to this. This is more of a kind of like astrology theme, but it's fine. For this one, I again wanted to play around with the width that you get in the square notebook, so we have each of these on tiered Dutch doors, or what a lot of people call waterfall tabs. So you can see that that last page is the widest, then the next page is slightly narrower, The next page is slightly narrower again, so on and so forth. So you can see all of the washi tapes from this front page here. This one was effectively acting as my cover page for the month. So we have the October header. The monthly log stayed on a single page, but again, I was still finding it too tight. And then the projects list kind of got condensed, so we just have the membership perks, things that were coming out for YouTube, and any other stuff. Again, these things did get done, they just didn't get crossed off because busy Jess doesn't use her planner. You can see that I did use my color coding dots on the calendar to indicate the type of things that were happening. So for instance, blue for any work tasks, green for anything related to finances, pink for anything mental health related, that kind of thing. But flipping over, and this is where we started to get into my high bar, low bar for my monthly habits, or effectively things that I was tracking monthly. These are technically daily habits. I love how this worked out, and you can see that the high bar, low bar kept me much more motivated to actually get in and fill this in. Yes, I still fell off on the last 2 days of the month, but at least I didn't fall off on like the 15th or the 20th, so that is a vast improvement compared to some of my habit trackers. Again, the general gist for this one is that we have a high bar and a low bar for each of the habits, so the high bar being the level that we realistically want to be achieving that habit at, whereas the low bar being a kind of pared down, easier version of that. Depending on the habit, this might look like different things, but for instance, if we take like intake water in the form of water, so like drinking water, not drinking Coke Zero, my high bar is 1 glass, which for some people is still probably a pretty low bar, but for me that's a high bar, and my low bar is 1 sip. Effectively, the low bar should be something kind of like laughably easy, or like so easy that you'd feel kind of silly if you didn't do it. That's still not to say that they all got done every single day, but my success rate in terms of actually completing my habits was so much better by setting that low bar as low as I did. Certainly something that is coming forward with me into 2024. This spread here is for my meal planning and meal logging. So in terms of planning our meals, we pretty much only plan dinners, but I wanted a section for that so that I could see what we were intending on eating. But because we don't always eat what we plan to eat, I also wanted a place to record what we actually did eat. You can also see I was going through my chocolate phase, so we have lots of chocolate in the snacks column, which is weird because typically I'm not much of a chocolate eater, but I was like really into chocolate. I was just like obsessed with having chocolate. This layout was a new one for me, and it was going to be a kind of work scheduler in terms of when I was not only releasing pieces of content, but also when I was working on the pieces of content and what kind of work I was doing for each of those. The idea here was that I was going to map out when everything was due. Not that I left enough columns for everything I was releasing, but that's fine. And then I could backwards map when I was doing certain tasks, mainly with the idea of kind of batching tasks together. So for instance, filming and trying to make my filming days not every single day, or editing and not trying to make my editing days every single day. I could then also map those onto this calendar here, so I could kind of see which days were themed for which different pieces of work. But because I didn't leave enough columns, and because I put this kind of like grid in the background, it meant that these colors didn't show up as nicely as they could have, so I was less inclined to use it. I also didn't use dot markers for these dots, and it would have been way easier if I had. Each of these little circles I actually had to go and color in, and I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a barrier to success, so I didn't use it. Flipping over though, and we have my actions list, which I put next to my monthly review. This was something new for me as well, and something I was kind of just trying out. I did end up not preferring it next to the monthly review, because realistically I don't check in with the monthly review as often as other layouts, for instance the habit tracker, and usually I would like to put my actions list next to the habit tracker so that I check in with both of them on a more regular basis. But it's good to try different things and see what works, and this was just one that didn't really work out. I decided to keep going with the thirds option when it came to my daily logging and weekly logging. So the weekly log just being this kind of like box that has each of the days of the week and what's going on, and then also a little weekly list of stuff to do. And then as the week progresses, I just add a daily header, write out my tasks, and then box it off at the end of the day. One of the fun things about this was also putting in a couple of extra little bits and pieces. So for instance, a little kind of celebration box for the Archer and Olive ambassador team. We also had a couple of like themed checklists as we went throughout, but here is the second week of October with my little weekly tasks list. This box here was effectively like a revamped version of what I had tried to set up over here. So while over here I was kind of trying to do it as more like a graphical approach so I can kind of visualize when things are happening, on this one I just decided to write in the number for the day that was going to have that thing done on it. This actually worked surprisingly well, and I should probably bring something like this back into my future setups. Something for me to think about. But we have a little plan for my favorite things day. We have book club thoughts, planning out what my exclusive videos are, my crafty day projects, just a bunch of other stuff, all in amongst my daily logs. And making these little micro lists was just really fun. I really enjoyed that about October. While I do very much like how the ruled boxes look, it was also a little bit tedious. Again, when I came towards the end of the month, I had sectioned out maybe a little bit too much space for myself, so I just gave a column per day, and then some days just did not use all of the column, but you know, it's fine. And then we're into November. Now again for November, I wanted to use the tiered Dutch doors or the waterfall tabs, and despite having told myself that I did not want my calendar all on one page, I put the calendar all on one page. I also had some issues with this calendar because I did not draw it out properly. I didn't start it on the 1st, which is on the Wednesday, and then when I went to number it, I didn't realize that I didn't have the 1st, and then I was painting the numbers, and I was like, I can't really fix that, so I needed to paste over it with paper, and then the pen I was using initially when I colored in the boxes, I don't know if you can tell, but it kind of lightly ghosted through to the other side. I was having a time with this calendar. When it came to the theme of the setup, now, as you can see, it looks very much more like a ginkgo than anything else, but technically this was supposed to be a trees theme. Jess has gotten a little loose with her interpretations of some of these themes, I swear. But we've got the monthly calendar, again with those color dots to represent different areas of life. This one was the monthly task list, of which I only had 2 tasks that I put on here, and one of them got migrated. After this, we brought the actions list back up front, having what I'm going to call the full spread, but really there is not a lot of space here to write it, but it's all good. So 2 columns for the actions list. Again, life was very busy in November though, so not a lot of this stuff got done. For the meal plan, I decided just to look at dinners rather than looking at dinners, lunch, breakfast, and snacks, but again wanted the planning section and the logging section. Now, given the fact that my habit tracker had worked so well in October, I wanted to keep the train moving with that. I still wanted to use the high bar, low bar, but when it came to planning out the layout, I didn't really plan in a space to put that stuff, so I ended up putting in a little tip in here, which is just a little door, which underneath houses the high bar and the low bar for each of the habits. But I found this kind of like weirdly difficult to use. Like technically all the information is here once you open up the little door and you can see the stuff. But having to read off what the habit was and then find it on the list and not having a kind of like header. Here, I'll show you what I mean. So for instance, let's just say we're looking at the multivitamin. So multivitamin is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in, which means I need to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down. But without counting that, I wouldn't necessarily know which of these items lined up with which of these habits. If we flip back to October though, the way I set that one up was just a little bit more user-friendly. So on this one, I have the little descriptor of what the habit is, but then I have the descriptor again written out in kind of a little bit more detail, and then underneath the header I specified what the high bar, low bar was. This ended up working a little bit better. It was also color coded, so like out of bed is that green kind of minty color, and then the next one is the same color, the next one is that same color, so they kind of matched up. It was a little bit easier. So if I go like, okay, AM teeth, that's purple, I know I'm only looking at purple ones, brush my teeth in the morning, all good. Whereas this one just wasn't as user-friendly. I do like the little door though. I thought that was kind of cute, but yeah, didn't work as well as it could have. After this one, I really liked the ripped edges though, with the gold paint. That was pretty. But we have the work calendar again, and for this one I decided to use that style that I'd put in the weekly pages rather than that kind of graphical style that I used in the October monthly pages. So the one where I actually just write in the number for the day of the month where I was going to do the specific task. I wasn't so great at filling it in. I think that this one would probably work a little bit better on either a fortnightly basis or with the different types of content sectioned away from each other. So for instance, all of my membership perks together versus all of my YouTube content content together. In this one, I put everything in all at once and just kind of ordered it in terms of release, but if I were to do it again, I would do it a little bit differently. The work calendar did get a little bit better in terms of its use, and the idea for this one was that I would have 4 blocks of time during the day where I do work, and I could specify what block of time was used for what type of task. So we have the types of tasks down here, and in these ones I actually used the dot markers to make it a little bit easier. The problem was I didn't go into this layout with a good idea of how I wanted to use it. For instance, was I going in here and mapping out what I expected to do, or was I coming in here after the fact and mapping out what actually happened? Because I wasn't super clear on that, I wasn't really sure about how I was using it, and then things ended up getting moved around and stuff. A little bit messy, so I kind of abandoned it, and abandoned it pretty soon into the month. Again, busy month, didn't use it. As the title suggests, this page was intended for Vlogmas, but I ended up setting up another Vlogmas page in the back of the notebook. So I didn't end up using that one, but I did use my November in review, again with those same sections, and I'm very pleased that I got in and filled it in because I love my review layouts. After this one though, we're into what would typically be the weekly and daily planning, but at the start of November, I decided I didn't really like weekly planning anymore. It wasn't really working for me. So I opted to instead go with fortnightly planning, or every 2 weeks, bi-weekly kind of stuff. This gives me a snapshot of 2 weeks together rather than just an individual week. Kind of helps me combat a little bit of the kind of blinders that I put on myself when it comes to doing my weekly stuff. I end up getting into a bit of a cycle each week if I don't consider what's coming up. So having fortnightly planning rather than weekly is kind of my way to combat that. As part of this, I also wanted to map out the time blocks that I was using for each of my days. So 5 time blocks roughly, where the last time block is hopefully some kind of rest or leisure activity. So each of my dailies followed the format of the header with whatever day number it was, 5 little dots to indicate the 5 time blocks, and then underneath that is where I put my task list. So we have Wednesday in terms of its blocked out time, and then its task list, Thursday's task list, ooh, that one's a big one, Friday's task list, so on and so forth. I also gave myself the opportunity to put in some more of those little lists that I liked. So spooky food for our spooky night, an Archer and Olive order that I was putting in. I feel like this year has been very much the year of daily logging for me. I think I'm really getting into a groove with making it work for me, and that was something that I really wasn't expecting from probably the first couple of years of my bullet journaling journey. I was very much a weekly planner. I liked having a weekly layout. I liked having sectioned out boxes for each of the weekdays, whereas nowadays, not so much. You can see we have a little bit of planning for the book club. I also love this lettering style. Been using it a lot more recently. Then we have the next fortnight and planning that out in terms of what was coming out and what I needed to do. Planning for my reading journal in terms of filling things in. Made a little shopping list. And then we have the end of November, which actually finished at a very good point. I predicted the space necessary quite well this month. I also like how the washi tape just made for very easy decoration compared to actually drawing out the ginkgo leaves that we had on the monthly. Like, they look very nice. I do think that they are pretty dang cute, but they also are time costly, and time was not something I had a lot of in November. For December, this was a mountains theme, so we have the mountains in the moon. I don't know why, but I pretty much always pair mountains and moons together in some way, but I did intentionally try to do something a little bit different with this mountain setup compared to any previous ones I've done. Previously, when I do mountains and moons, I usually go for either buffalo plaid or I go for navy and gold or something like that. So this time I was very intentionally like, no, we are not doing buffalo plaid, we are not doing blue. We're gonna go with green instead, and I absolutely love this color combination. I think that it is so pretty. But again, to keep things simple for myself, because busy season, don't really want to spend too much time setting things up, I opted to use brown paper bags and then print the headers onto those, rip them up and stick them in. This made for some nice kind of decorative lettering that I didn't have to do myself. So we have the cover page, which has kind of returned in full force and on the right hand side, but we still have the little tabs to make use of the extra width in the square notebook. The actions list is up the front here instead of the projects list, and that's because the projects list did not get put in here. Rather than just being for goals in December, the actions list has ended up being for pretty much anything that needs to be actioned. Because December is hella busy in terms of all the Vlogmas content and then also just like end of year wrap up, holiday season, that kind of thing, I decided to just make this for anything that needed to get done. But actions list, December cover page, then I finally made my monthly go across 2 pages. But funnily enough, this is also the month that I decided that monthly planning really wasn't for me either. I drew this one out and kind of set it up before I had formally decided that, but as you can see, I haven't really been using my monthly log all that much. The general idea though was that I could use this as kind of a memory keeping space, so you can see a couple little memories in there. And then this section on the side is for a weekly task list, so things that I need to do in week 1, things to do in week 2, week 3, so on and so forth. I'm gonna sound like a broken record, but again, busy Jess, neglected planner, and also monthly planning just doesn't really work for me. What has been working for me though is fortnightly planning, so I set up my fortnights ahead of time rather than putting them in with my daily logs. So you can see here we have 14 days and a little box for each of them to indicate what's going on. We have a habit tracker, which I have been neglecting, but I'm okay with. I'm giving myself grace about not tracking my habits for this month, mainly because it wouldn't do me any good to kind of pile on and be like, oh, why haven't you been tracking your habits? You said you wanted to get these things done. Why haven't you been recording them? It would literally just end up making me feel kind of shitty about myself, and I don't need that kind of stress right now. I'm trying to enjoy myself and eventually enjoy my holiday period, so like, let's not. Along with this, we also have a meal planner, though I know that in future iterations of this, I'm gonna have to have a meal planner and a meal log because we are not very good at actually eating the things we plan in the order we plan them. Like, they get eaten eventually, but not necessarily in this order. Like, we had our mushroom pasta, and then rather than summer rolls, we moved summer rolls to miso soup day and moved miso soup day up. So the miso soup got eaten, but not on the 15th. Anywho, I also gave myself a little task space if I wanted to write down any fortnightly tasks. And the next layout is fairly similar, just slightly different in terms of placement. As said, we are only halfway through December right now, so this one hasn't really gotten filled in, and neither has my monthly review, which again has the same kind of 9 sections. And I also put in a space for my 2024 ideas, but haven't really needed to put anything there just yet either. Flipping on over though, and we are into the daily logs. Now, I was intending on doing some kind of decoration in the dailies, but it just hasn't happened. I'm still using the torn brown paper headers though, and those are very cute. I kind of feel like that's decorative enough, and with being my busy self, I just haven't been all that inclined to get in here and do any decoration. You can see I have kept up with my little time blocking thing here though, so for instance, right now it is the second time block, and we are doing filming here. And then after that, we'll probably have to do some editing. But I do actually have quite a few pages after this one to put in more daily logs, obviously, and then also any other things that I might need to put in before 2024. That does not mean that this planner is done though. At the back of my journal, I also had some other things that I've set up. This one in particular was for my mental reset, which has a separate video, but on this one we were outlining the priorities for the mental reset, the steps that needed to be taken, and then actually doing all of the steps. This was effectively just like a super effective brain dump or mind unwind to just get everything out of my head, a little kind of brain decluttering. And I did find it to be a very good process, and I'm probably going to try and do more of these next year. Not just like one big annual one, but on a more regular basis. After the mental reset, we also have some pen testing pages. So we have the Ohuhu swatches, which we did together on a stream. We also have the zebra click art, and I've got 3 sets of those. And I just wanted to put them in terms of what number corresponds with which color. And then in the very back, we have my end of year planning. So this was my list to jot down anything that I wanted to have happen before the end of 2024. And again, some of these have happened, some of them haven't, and I certainly have other things that need to get done. We have a little cover page for the end of year plans, and I went with the little tabs again with the black outline because I liked it so much in September. It was just a bit of fun. These ones are little PET tapes from the washi tape shop. This guy here was a kind of plan in terms of what work blocks I was doing for what kind of stuff, and also blocking out what time I did not have available for certain things. I was pretty good at filling it in towards the start of November, but not so much the middle to end of November, December. This one here is the release calendar, so I could see when everything was coming out. And this type of layout, honestly, is a better representation of how I actually see my time. I don't like monthly planning because I don't like how it arbitrarily kind of just like cuts off in the middle of a week. I like to be able to see the idea of week to week to week, even when we change months. So this is a style that I'm using more so in my next journal. After this, we have my content making stuff, so Vlogmas videos, membership perks, also a space for anything else and non-video related content. We have my plans for the yearly reset, which have been done now, including the mental reset, which I haven't actually written out the prompts for, but now as the mental reset's done, I probably won't fill it in. My office revamp project, which I'm feeling very good about. And then after this, we're into the Christmas and holiday planning. I haven't transferred over my itinerary yet, but that's what this section is for. So effectively morning plans, kind of afternoon plans, and evening plans, just so I can kind of see at a glance what's happening without any specific times tied to things. This box is for my packing list, which I do need to write because packing day is soon. And then we have our meal plan for the Christmas period with my family. And in amongst this, the idea was to put down spaces for like gift ideas or anything else in particular that I wanted to do or experience or have happen over that period. I just haven't had anything to write in there yet, so it's just sitting here blank. And honestly, there's a very high likelihood that it stays blank. This layout though was for my 2024 planners and planning those out in terms of which ones got videos, which ones get a setup, what things do I want to include in the setup. I don't know why I made my yearly collections box as long as I did. I think in my mind, I'm like, oh yeah, there's going to be that many spreads, so you need to have that many points. But some of these collections take up multiple spreads, so wasn't super necessary. Not only did I have a space to review the journals I used this year, but I also had a 2024 plan section, so the journals that I was planning on using for next year, and also a place to map out any videos that I wanted to make as regarding those 2024 and 2023 planners. Just like in September, this last tab is not actually a tab, it's just on the page. And then over the page we have something that looks very messy, but honestly was a lot of fun. And this is a washi tape graveyard. So anytime I have had a little scrap of washi tape from setting something up in my journal, I've just put the scrap back here. I haven't put every single scrap on here, to be honest, like the ones that are super, super tiny that are kind of all scrunched up and you can't really get unstuck from itself. Those ones haven't ended up here, but any of the offcuts that aren't necessarily big enough to really use on another layout, but are big enough to still warrant sticking down on a page, they have gone here. I liked making these little ladders and little fans and stuff like that. It's just been a little bit of fun. Flipping over and into the back cover though, we have a sticky note here that says 2024 Book Club, and that was when I was planning out the layouts that I wanted to include in my new journal setups. And then in the back pocket, we've got a couple different things. We have a little flyer from an experience that Vogel and I went to. It was called Eat the Film, and we went and saw aliens, and then they had different food and drink that was kind of themed around what was happening in the movie. I have a little plastic card that says it's a pocket-sized hug from me to you, and this one was sent to me from somebody who was saying thank you for something I sent them. Oh my gosh, I can't remember and I feel kind of bad about that, but this used to be on my wall, but when I rearranged my office, I just put it into my journal. We have a voucher that I'm probably not gonna use, so I should probably throw away. A card from one of my students that again used to be on my wall, but when I rearranged my office, I've just put it into my journal. She was such a good egg. A little thank you card from Stationery Pal, and then a couple little thank you and hello postcards from Joe and the team at Oopsie-Daisy. This video was super long and you are super dedicated, so chuck I'm a wizard down in the comments if you made it to this point, but honestly I loved my journal lineup from 2023. I love what they taught me in terms of my journaling style and what I prefer to do, and I'm really excited about taking those lessons forward into 2024. If you're curious about my 2024 planning system and how things are changing, then this playlist is the one to check out next. That one not only has my setups of my new journals, but also a breakdown of how I'm going to be using all of them. So if that sounds interesting, click or tap on that one and I'll see you over there.